how can we have justice for domestic violence survivors without using prisons or police?
So as a survivor myself, and also as a Black woman, I've had to, look for solutions outside the system because I have personally been re-victimized by these institutions, whether it be after an assault or whether it be in the context of intimate partner violence. The police was never there. I never saw the police as an institution that was there to protect me because of my negative experiences. So considering the harm that is, reenacted when a lot of survivors reach out to these institutions, it has pushed me to look for alternatives. And I see, like, we talk a lot about justice, but we don't really talk about what that means for survivors. Like a lot of us, and I don't pretend to like speak for everybody, but a lot of us, we just want to heal. And we just want accountability. We want the people who were involved in causing the harm to be accountable. And we also want community accountability because I think we all have a role to play in ending gender-based violence. And I just think it's a moment that we're in a moment where we need to invest in solutions that address the systemic root of the problem. These are not just individual cases. This talks to a systemic issue, which is gender-based violence, and which compounds with anti-Black racism, which compounds with colonialism, which compounds with other types of oppression. And so I work with communities to look for alternative solutions that are based in care and community accountability, and are not, do not rely on a system that claims to condemn the same violence that it perpetuates in the process.
Thank you so much. So I guess for someone who wants to escape domestic violence and they, kind of fear for the worst if they're going to these shelters and maybe the person might track them, follow them, whatnot. I guess what would be one of the solutions to feel more protected that you would recommend that is not the police?
So first of all, in terms of resources, there are not resources that are accessible and safe for all victims of gender-based violence. We have to just start there. We're not at a point where we can say that all women have access to resources when they are victims of gender-based violence, or all people that are victims of gender-based violence. So unfortunately, we have organizations that address gender-based violence, but do not offer services to all survivors. We've seen, I worked personally many years within the anti-violence movement, and I see the exclusion of a lot of survivors, whether it be survivors with disabilities, Black and Indigenous survivors that can't access culturally secure spaces for support. Trans survivors. We have a lot of resources that are trans exclusive, that exclude trans survivors from accessing secure and meaningful support systems. So we need to start also talking about accountability in terms of the organizations that are out there and that are supposed to offer support for survivors and are not doing so. The reality is that a lot of Black, Indigenous, racialized women do not feel safe in traditional mainstream organizations that address violence. They feel stigmatized because we address this violence by, creating this idea that the root of the problem is cultural, racial. So it just raises stigma. And so a lot of women do not feel comfortable accessing these resources. And a lot of women also do not feel comfortable filing a complaint, And so we need to have alternative resources for those women and for those people who do not have access to these services and do not feel safe with the police or, engaging in a process which involves the criminal justice system.
Okay, and I know this is a bit difficult, but maybe in order to have something that looks like this, what are some of the kind of things you see this being, like BIPOC run, like kind of like a bit more of,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we need resources that are by and for. Right now I'm working with a group of organizers in Montreal North to establish a sexual assault resource center that's by and for. And we're also working on a prevention program. Um, I've had experience with prevention programs that are, deployed in schools. And a lot of times when it comes to schools that are, have a large representation of BIPOC kids, what I see is there's a strong stigmatization when it comes to prevention. The way they engage with youth by stigmatizing and not by empowering. And so that's where we want to like contribute to create something different, create a space for, young folks to be able to engage on these issues in a critical manner and to be able to unlearn certain things, and to be able to also address the stigmatization and the racism, because, a lot of these youth face different types of state violence, not to just talk about gender-based violence. So I think prevention is the key. We need to start early, but we need to develop and invest in community-led initiatives, because a lot of times the mainstream programs that are available are not safe and stigmatize our communities and our youth. So I think it's important to invest not only in um, support services, whether it be shelters that are safe for our communities, but also in prevention programs that do not stigmatize or uphold racist conceptions regarding certain communities.
Kind of branching on that, would you say that just heavily relying on, the police and prisons and things like that, would you say that it kind of furthers a trauma and maybe like creates just heavily creates this issue of, like overpopulation in our prisons and not actually solving the roots of these problems?
Well, as an abolitionist, of course, I think that. For me, prisons are an extension of the same cycles of violence that we seek to, to eliminate. So it's for me, it's a contradiction to like being an organizer against gender-based violence to invest in solutions that perpetuate these forms of violence. And so, well, I'm not going to condemn a survivor for calling the police, not at all. I think we do need to take the time to think about alternatives and investing in solutions that will, in the long term, transform, our communities and transform the harm. We really need to start talking more about healing. Like, I don't see any trauma-centered, healing-centered initiatives. It's always like a neoliberal approach to addressing gender-based violence, like assuming that we're talking about individual cases and locking up individuals will solve the problem, and that's not it, and it hasn't worked. It's not going to work. So yeah, I think these are opportunities to talk about alternatives and moving forward and push our local authorities to be accountable and to invest in these services, and also to ask for accountability in terms of those mainstream services that are already available and that are asking for more money in these contexts of violence. What are they doing to provide support that's safe, culturally secure, for Black, Indigenous, trans, disabled survivors?
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to ask for people who are interested in using the services that you're trying to create, is there maybe like a sort of timeline or maybe when we might be able to use them?
Well, so we're like I said, there's this project right now in Montreal North, but I think, different communities are organizing in different ways to provide support. And so I would just suggest that people engage within their communities And I don't know if it's appropriate, but we're having a town hall next week, the Coalition to Defund the Police on Wednesday. And it's called Take Back the Fight. It's on, it's an allusion to the Take Back the Night march instead of Take Back the Night, Take Back the Fight. And it's, take back the fight against gender-based violence, but, through grassroots and community-based initiatives. And so they could, people could attend the town hall. And I just would suggest that they reach out and try to, in their communities to see what can be done. Because I just highlighted one example of one project, but the need is really big. And so we should start also listening to communities that have been, raising red flags, saying that they need supports and they need supports to be able to answer requests for support in terms of gender-based violence, because a lot of survivors and victims are not going to these traditional services because they're not safe.